The room smelled like disinfectant and something colder underneath. Monitors beeped steadily near the window. The man in the bed turned his head slowly, eyes sharp despite the oxygen tubes resting beneath his nose. She stepped in with her usual grace, clipboard in one hand, her navy scrubs clean and pressed, curls tucked neatly under her cap. He didn't even let her reach the bed. "I don't want a black nurse," he said, voice gravelly but clear. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't masked in discomfort. It was loud enough to echo. She froze for half a second. Not out of shock, not anymore. Then she exhaled softly and nodded once. No emotion showed on her face. Not the sting, not the history. Just a smooth pivot as she turned and walked back into the hallway, where the light was just a little warmer and the air didn't hold his voice. No one else in the ward stopped moving. The world kept spinning like it always did when things like this happened. One nurse gave her a glance. One of those sad, helpless ones that people wear when they want to acknowledge something but not deal with it. She didn't need their pity. She walked back to the nurse's station and set the chart down without a sound. Her fingers were steady, though her pulse thudded in her wrist. She had heard it before. Not always said that way, but always meant the same. At one clinic, it was the man who kept calling her girl like she was invisible. At another, it was the woman who asked for someone less urban. They came in all forms, but they always left the same bruise. She didn't ask to be reassigned, she didn't storm, she didn't cry in the break room. She just stood still for a moment and let herself feel nothing. Not numb, just disciplined. She'd worked hard for this badge, studied until her eyes blurred, passed her exams with no second chances. She'd stayed late, showed up early, held hands, changed bedpans, sung to elderly patients when they were dying and scared. But all that disappeared with one sentence from a man who didn't even know her name. "I don't want a black nurse." She could still hear it, still see the way he wrinkled his nose, like she brought dirt into the room. He didn't want her knowledge, didn't want her presence, just wanted to make sure she knew her place. But what he didn't know was that she never forgot moments like this. She carried them like quiet fire, let them shape her, not shrink her. She wouldn't speak of it in tomorrow's meeting. She wouldn't bring it up at shift change. But she remembered, and one day, he would too. She learned to tie a tourniquet before she knew how to braid her own hair. Her mother was a nurse, so was her aunt, and her grandmother before them. She grew up in houses where the kitchen table held medical charts and where bedtime stories were whispered between phone calls from double shifts. The language of care was spoken fluently in her home. Blood pressure, pulse, vitals, charting. Not words for school, words for survival. Grief came early, and it came hard. Her father passed when she was 9, the kind of slow leaving that drags across months and rearranges a child's understanding of time. She watched her mother stand strong in the day and cry only when the hallway was dark. She remembered the smell of hospitals not as fear, but as a place where people worked miracles with tired eyes and aching backs. That's what made her choose this path. Not glory, not television drama, but the way her mother wrapped her arms around people who were falling apart. The way her aunt stood at attention during a code blue without trembling. She saw what it looked like to hold others together, even when the world tried to pull you apart. In nursing school, she was always the only one who looked like her. The professors learned her name last. The patients stared longest when she walked in. She carried her books with quiet focus, sat in the front, knew she had to answer twice as fast to be taken half as seriously. She did it anyway. There were nights she cried in her car. Not from failure, from the weight. The weight of being excellent and still invisible. The weight of hearing a patient ask for someone else without blinking. The weight of having to decide every day whether to fight back or let it pass. She kept going. She knew this job was more than income. It was legacy. Her ancestors were midwives, field healers, caretakers who never wore scrubs but saved lives with their hands and whatever they could find in the earth. Her uniform may have changed, but the work hadn't. She carried that with her every time she stepped into a room. Room 304 was not the first space that didn't want her. She had treated patients who flinched at her touch, who called her by the wrong name, who questioned every instruction twice. She had smiled through condescension, answered with patience when others gave her judgment. She did not forget any of it. So when the man in that bed told her to leave, she did. Not because he was right, but because she had already survived worse. His words landed, but they did not shake her foundation. They did not take her skill, her softness, her power. She walked out of the room carrying everything he could never see. And she would walk back in when it mattered, not for him. But because that's who she was, the shift moved forward as usual, one hallway blending into the next, machines humming, lights soft and clinical. But room 304 stayed different. The door was always half open, the mood inside, untouched. He no longer snapped at anyone who entered, he didn't greet them either. His eyes followed movement, but his words had gone quiet. The nurses rotated in and out, some making an effort, others passing the responsibility, like a note no one wanted to read. One nurse brought in fresh linens, tried asking about his pain level, and got nothing but silence in return. Another adjusted his IV and muttered, more to herself than him, "Let us know if you need anything." He didn't nod, he didn't blink, he just stared past her like she wasn't there. The attitude that once filled the room like smoke had burned itself out, leaving only something brittle behind. He was deteriorating. Slowly, visibly, he had become thin in the face. His hands trembled when he lifted a cup. He still refused help, still pressed the call button only when absolutely necessary. But everyone could see it. Something was fading, not just in his body, but in the way the room felt. She noticed it too. The black nurse he had sent away with those first bitter words. She never said his name again, never brought him up to coworkers. She continued her work with the same quiet efficiency she had always carried. Rooms were cleaned, patients were comforted, vitals checked and recorded. She moved with grace, never rushed, never resentful, and when she passed room 304, she did not look in. But she listened. Not for his words, for his absence. The silence became its own rhythm. No shouting, no thank yous, no requests. Just the same mechanical sounds from the machines, the shallow breaths, the occasional cough that came and went like someone trying not to ask for help. Then came the night. It was past midnight. The halls dimmed to soft yellow. The ward hushed under fluorescent stillness. She was near the end of her rounds when the code rang out. A voice over the intercom. Fast. Urgent. Room 304. She was the closest. No time to think. She moved, without hesitation, already halfway to the door as the sound echoed overhead. Gloves snapped on. Eyes focused. Her body shifted into instinct. She burst into the room and found him gasping, eyes wide, chest stuttering. He looked up and saw her. Only her. For the first time since he arrived, he looked directly at her. And he did not speak. He did not say her name. Did not apologize. He only reached for something. Something steady. Something human. Her hand found his without needing to be asked. Not for him. For the moment. For the oath she had taken. For the part of her that always chose care, even in places that never gave it back. And this time, she didn't step away. The lights in the room flickered just once before the alarm went off again. Louder this time, slicing through the silence like a blade. She was already inside. Moving fast, pulling on gloves as her eyes scanned the monitors. Vitals were dropping, the line on the screen jagged and shallow. His chest rose in sharp, erratic bursts. He was awake, but drowning in his own body, panic painting his face a shade paler than fear alone. She didn't speak. There wasn't time. Her hands moved with purpose. Oxygen flow first. She adjusted the mask, tightened the straps, turned the dial with one practiced twist. The beeping slowed, not much, but enough to buy seconds. She slipped the blood pressure cuff around his arm and checked the IV line. Clear. Still dripping, still stable. He looked at her, and for the first time, he truly saw her, not the woman he dismissed, not the nurse he rejected, just the only person standing between him and the dark. His mouth opened, no sound came out, his fingers twitched against the sheet like he was reaching for something but not sure he deserved to touch it. She caught it. Her hand closed around his, firm and steady. She kept her eyes on the monitors, kept her breathing calm, but her grip did not waver, not for sympathy, not for recognition. For grounding, his eyes blinked fast, and she saw the glint of tears he tried to hide. The same man who once spat at her presence now trembled under her care. He wasn't proud anymore. He wasn't cruel. He was human. And terrified. She didn't remind him of his words. Didn't replay the moment he rejected her like she wasn't trained, wasn't capable, wasn't worthy. She let the machines speak. Let her skill speak. Let her hand be the only voice in the room. His pulse began to steady. The color returned to his face, slowly, like forgiveness warming frozen ground. He gripped her hand tighter. She didn't pull away. Even after the worst had passed, after the second nurse stepped in and whispered that help was on the way, she stayed for one more moment, for the sake of the life still flickering in that room. And when she finally let go, she left something behind. A silence that held no hatred, no pride, just understanding. He closed his eyes, not in fear this time, but in something closer to surrender. And she walked out the door without looking back. She didn't need his apology. Her care had never been conditional, but now he knew what her presence meant. And he would never forget the hand he once tried to reject, because it was the only one that stayed. She noticed it the moment she stepped onto the floor. His room door was cracked open, not shut tight like usual. He was awake, waiting. That was new. His chart was quiet that morning. No updates, no overnight events, vitals holding steady, a breath of calm in a shift already brimming with too much. She moved through her routine, checked on the woman down the hall recovering from surgery, helped a new mother with discharge forms, laughed softly with a child who asked if nurses could fly if they wanted to. The same care, the same presence, room by room. Then she walked past 304. She didn't slow, but his voice followed her. "Nurse?" She stopped, turned halfway. He was sitting up in bed, shoulders hunched, blanket drawn to his waist. The early sunlight hit the side of his face, exposing a jaw now softened by illness. His eyes, always sharp, now looked like they'd been fighting something long before the hospital ever saw him. He motioned slightly. Not a full wave, more like an invitation. She stepped in, but stayed near the door. "I just wanted to say thank you," he began. Voice tight, like it hurt to speak. She didn't move, didn't smile, just listened. His fingers fumbled with the blanket's edge. "For yesterday, you didn't have to help me, but you did." Silence hung in the space between them. Then, slowly, he added the words he had clearly rehearsed, maybe all night. "I was wrong." They sat there, suspended. Not dramatic, not tearful, just true. She let the quiet fill the room a moment longer before answering. "I've heard that before." Her voice was low. But this time, she added, "I needed you to say it. Not for me, for you." He blinked hard, nodded once. She saw the effort it took. Not the apology, the honesty. "I grew up thinking people like you. Nurses like. I didn't know." She raised her eyebrows slightly. Not angry, just waiting to see where he would take it. "You did know," she said. "You just didn't care to act like it mattered." He looked away. She didn't twist the knife. That wasn't her way. But she didn't soften the truth either. "You don't owe me anything," she continued. "But if you really mean what you said, then maybe the next time someone walks into your space, someone who looks like me, you remember this." "Cues," Q said. She turned to go. He didn't stop her. And this time, when the door closed, it didn't feel like dismissal. It felt like something was finally understood. Not finished, but finally undeniably seen. She walks down the hallway with the same calm she carried every day. But this time, she wasn't carrying the weight alone. The machine still worked, but more slowly now. The numbers on the monitor shifted in smaller increments, and his breathing, though steady, carried the weight of something deeper. His appetite had faded. So had the color in his cheeks. The team adjusted his medications, monitored fluid levels, kept the chart updated, but the prognosis lingered unspoken between the lines. He was declining, not in a rush, but with certainty. Yet something in the room had changed. He didn't bark orders anymore, he didn't refuse help, his tone was softer, though still gruff at times. But now, he looked up when people entered, especially her. He started asking small questions. First about the shift, then about her schedule, then, gradually, her life. She didn't open the door all at once. She told him little things, where she grew up, that she had a brother who played drums, that she used to walk past a hospital every day after school and think it looked like a city made of hope. He asked if she always knew she wanted to be a nurse. She said yes, then added that she didn't always know how hard it would be to be one. He nodded at that, said nothing, but she saw the understanding settle behind his eyes. The nurses at the station noticed. They saw the way he waited when she passed by, the way he turned slightly toward her voice in the hallway. He didn't smile much, but the stiffness had gone from his face. Other patients noticed too. One asked if she was the same nurse who got yelled at on his first night. She just shrugged, said nothing, but the patients smiled like they already knew. Some nights, she'd sit at his bedside longer than necessary, not because he asked, but because it felt right. The room didn't carry hostility anymore. It carried weight, shared silence. She once told him about her mother's hands, how they never stopped moving, even when she was tired. He listened closely, eyes focused on a point just beyond the window. When she stood to leave, he said quietly, "You have her hands." She nodded once, didn't speak. Then one afternoon, as she was finishing rounds, another nurse leaned in close and whispered, "He told his daughter about you." She paused mid-step. "He said you changed his mind about something," the nurse added. Didn't say what, but he sounded different. She didn't answer right away, just looked down the hall toward his room. The door was open. The sunlight streamed across the floor in long golden bars. He was sitting up, looking through an old photo album someone had brought from home. She walked past without going in. Some things didn't need to be spoken aloud. The lesson wasn't in the apology. It was in the fact that the room, once built on resistance, had become something gentler, something honest. And it had nothing to do with who he was. It was who she never stopped being. The room was still, not silent in a clinical way, but in that deep, respectful quiet that sometimes settles around a person before they leave. The machines had stopped making noise. The monitors no longer flashed. A soft sheet had been pulled up to his chest. His eyes were closed, his breathing slow, and then, not at all. She had stayed beside him for the last hour, not because he asked, but because she had promised herself she would always show up whole, no matter who the patient was. Her hand rested gently in his until the very end. His grip had faded gradually, like a wave pulling away from the shore. He hadn't said much that morning, just a quiet thank you when she checked his vitals. Then nothing. Now, he was gone. She stood there for a moment longer, letting the air settle. She didn't cry, she didn't bow her head. She simply let her hand fall away from his, then stepped back with the same grace she had brought into the room all those weeks ago. No one clapped. No one rushed in with cameras or quotes. But outside the door, 2 nurses paused when she stepped out. One gave a small nod. The other lowered her voice and said, "He asked for you." She didn't reply, just gave a small nod in return and walked toward the station. Her steps were calm, her face unreadable. Another patient, another shift. The rhythm never broke. But something was different. Word moved quietly through the halls, through whispers at the nurse's station, through the subtle shift in how the staff looked at her. They spoke her name with something heavier than before. Not out of pity, not out of shock, but with a kind of reverence, a kind of weight. She had become known for what she did, not what he called her. Not the insult that once echoed off sterile walls. Not the moment he dismissed her at the door. Not the bias that tried to erase her presence. But for the hand she held when no one else remained. She walked to the break room, hung up her coat, checked the next chart without missing a beat. Outside the hospital windows, the world kept moving. Cars, clouds, sun sliding across the sky. Inside, another patient waited. Another call light would blink soon. And she would answer it, not for recognition, not for redemption, but because that was who she chose to be. She never needed him to change. She just needed to stay true. And that was what made all the difference.